Well, I was going to test your memory. If you remember many years ago, you haven't aged, but I certainly have, when we did a hearing on mitochondrial DNA in California because it had never been introduced before. Yes, exactly. And one of the issues that we raised back then was similar to the issue that they're raising right now. It had never been admitted in a courtroom before, and the database that they were using both in California 25 years ago or 20 some odd years ago, and what they plan to do here is a very small database that is numbered in the thousands, not the hundreds of thousands, and they are taking that database, I think in this case 20 some odd hundred people, and they're using that to extrapolate out to get the millions or billions or quadrillions of numbers that you get when you replicate the DNA and then try and test it. I think it is not scientifically accepted on the extrapolation they're going to do, but remember, there also is another nuance to this. They have used the more traditional method on some of the other evidence that they've collected. Undoubtedly, some of that evidence is going to be admitted. If the judge has the inclination to want to let the new kind of process in where there's this degraded old DNA that they replicate so many times that they get a sample that's large enough and then they compare it to a very limited database, he's going to have to do a hearing in order to have that. It's not going to be just done by a legal decision.
Right, yeah, and we've been in the middle of a FRI hearing all summer long, and we're going to, not to get too far into the weeds, but what we're talking about here are these hairs that were found on skeletal remains in some of these cases, and years old. And it's interesting, too, because the prosecutor in this case, Ray Tierney, has talked about how this technology has been used for identifying victims of 9/11. So it's not brand new, but it would be brand new to be in the court. But if this is all tossed, Mark, if the judge says, look, it's just too new to bring into this trial, I mean, that's going to be really damaging for the prosecution. But to your point, there is other DNA that will be able to come in, but this was kind of the smoking gun.
Well, it clearly, if it's allowed in, really raises the bar for what the defense has to counteract, because it's quite damning if it's true and if the database that they're using is representative. The fight is going to be, is this sample of 20 some odd hundred DNA genome participants, does that represent a more widespread sample? If not, then the extrapolation is not all that effective, probably shouldn't be admissible. If they can show that they've replicated that smaller database against larger statistical samples, then you may have something and the prosecution may be able to get it in.
What are you doing if you are Rex Heuermann's defense attorney? Because his defense attorney reminds me kind of the fiery responses that we get at the press conferences, Michael Brown. It kind of reminds me of you. You guys have that, that defense attorney DNA, so to speak. What are you doing if you are his defense attorney to try to continue? The decision's coming on Wednesday, but if the DNA does come in, what do you do as a defense attorney?
I would imagine that he's becoming quite steeped, if not an expert already, in the science, because that's the only way you can combat it. You have to really kind of dig in. I remember before that hearing and a number of others that I've done with cell phone technology when it was originally used, things of that nature. You really have to get in there and become as proficient in the area as the experts are in order to be able to adequately cross-examine, because especially when they are emerging, there are always kind of bugs, if you will, in the analysis. And a lot of times experts or so-called experts from these labs or from who are using the technology have a economic interest that they're trying to vindicate. And you have to know what they're trying to prove and whether or not there's any chinks in the armor.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.